The Jersey Swap podcast is sponsored by Apollo Home. Folks, your orange and blue are back in action, but chances are your air conditioning has already been running a full match and added extra time, especially this extremely hot week. Keep it performing at its tip top best with a $29 AC tune up from Apollo Home. Give them a call, send them a text, or schedule online at apollohome.com. Welcome back to the Jersey Swap, everyone. And we're just about at the end of what we might consider a lukewarm summer. Maybe not in temperature, but more in play. FC Cincinnati have won games on the road when they've needed to, but the play at home has felt a little stagnant. The Orange and Blue have forgotten how to win at home since their blitz against Inter Miami back in July. The pressure will now come in waves as we have to deal with three of the best teams in the East at our home grounds. Nashville and Orlando will be coming down the stretch. But this weekend, we have to face the top dog, Philadelphia Union. Head coach Bradley Carnell has the Union flying very high, but how much could that also be attributed to the talent alone? So we're going to bring in Todd Lewis from the Free Kick podcast to get our semi-annual dupe check. So let's bring him in right now. How are we doing tonight, Todd?
Good. Thank you so much, Jeff, for having me onto the show. And yeah, it always seems like it's an entertaining game between these two teams. And it had been a hot minute since Philadelphia last got a win. And we'll see if they can repeat it. I feel like anytime that these two teams meet at TQL Stadium, it's always a high scoring feat. So we'll see if we'll get more of the same this weekend.
It's a hard thing to sort of gauge right now because we've been so used to playing the sort of sensei student type of role where it's been Pat Noonan trying to prove to Jim Curtin that he's more adept at his master, you might want to call it. But now things have changed, and Jim Curtin's moved on to hopefully greener pastures, and Bradley Carnell now has a stranglehold on this roster, along with Ernst Tanner doing a really good build in the off season. So we wanted to bring you on to sort of talk a little bit about this Philadelphia Union. But first, we sort of want to talk a little bit about yourself. We noticed if you look at the logo for your podcast, it has the big MD on it, Maryland. So I guess the big question is, I mean, how did it come about? And are podcasts situated between rivals often caught in the crossfire?
It's a good question. I'll start with the last, right? Where I'll be honest, I don't know too many DC United fans. I don't know anybody that does a DC United podcast. So nobody's ever given me stick for it, and I've been embraced greatly over the years by people in Philadelphia. And I jokingly say that Maryland's number one Philadelphia Union podcast, as it's the only Philadelphia Union podcast. So nobody else can claim it since I am the only one. So it is technically true. But so I came about watching the Philadelphia Union, supporting the Philadelphia Union back in 2018. I started to watch soccer in 2008, became a Manchester United fan watching the World Cup in 2006 between England and France, I believe the game was, or maybe it was England and Portugal. I can't remember. I think it was England and Portugal. And the commentators just kept talking about Manchester United, Manchester United, Manchester United. And I was like, well, that's all they're talking about, so I might as well become a fan of Manchester United and watch the Premier League religiously. And then it's like, there is American soccer here. When David Beckham came over to LA Galaxy, I was like, let's go ahead and see what this is all about. And my God, those early days of MLS, which maybe some of the listeners are like 2010, that's not early days. You got to go all the way back to 2000s. No, for me, early days 2010. And I was like, this is horrible. This is terrible compared to European soccer. I'm not watching MLS anymore. So I took a 8-year hiatus, and I was like, I'll give it a go again. And I was always thinking, if I do make it up to a game one day, what is closer? Mileage wise, it's closer going down to DC, but traffic wise, it's easier going up to Chester. So I said, I'll go ahead and become a Philadelphia Union fan. And so I attended my first game in 2019. And then I've had season tickets since 2020, but I haven't used my season tickets since 2022. I share them with my sister. So my sister usually brings a friend. If we can't, then the ticket just goes to waste, which it seems like that's been the case more times than not, because back in 2022, I started covering the Union from the press box. And then 2023, I became a full season press credential member. And so, I've been doing that full-time since 2023. This isn't my full-time job and everything. It's a side hobby and everything. But as you would know, Jeff, I mean, man, there's some late nights and everything keeping you up with writing and the podcast. And sometimes it does feel like a full-time job. I know when I had Justin Blair on the show last year,
Mhm,
we were
mhm.
talking about just how much goes into running Cincinnati Soccer Talk and just sharing just everybody that he has working behind the scenes. And it really is, for people that don't realize, like doing a podcast, running a website, it really is a full-time job.
Yeah, it's a passion project. It's a labor of love. Sometimes more emphasis on the labor than the love part. But I mean, yeah, half the time at home games, you're up in the press box and you're seeing, I think, more information from a different perspective. I'm glad to hear that that's you're part of the aspect of being a podcast and a prestidigitarian, I guess. I don't know what word you would use for someone who's a podcaster and a press box person, but we're all in the same boat. So it's good to have you on. As you had mentioned, it's been a while since our two teams have met. It feels like some years we'd have like 3 or 4 games, and it was always right around the corner when Jim Curtin come in. Last time you guys had the magic stuff. I mean, a 4-1 win up in Philadelphia. But the teams are also so different. I mean, was there anything about that game that you pick out that sort of gave you an idea that, yeah, Bradley Carnell has what's going on with this team?
Yeah, I mean, it was so early in the season, second game of the season, if I'm not mistaken. And the Union had just came off a 4-2 away victory against Orlando City. And to see the Union start that hot down in Orlando, um, I think that raised a lot of eyebrows. I know the national media didn't want to give the Union their credit, and maybe some people in the Philadelphia media didn't want to give them their credit. But I look at it as the Union had brought in my opinion, a lot of promising pieces. Yes, they came out of preseason with injuries to Jan Glavinovic. Eventually, he got healthy. They came with Bruno Damiani coming after the Orlando City game, so he
Mhm,
wasn't finalized yet. They came with Nathan Harriel, who was out for a little bit with an injury. Olivier Bizo, who's their backup right back, also injured during preseason. And so they're starting rookie Frankie Westfield against Orlando
mhm,
City. And he had a
mhm,
fantastic season down with Union 2 and MLS Next Pro, being included in the best 11 for MLS Next Pro last year. And Frankie, I mean, he's looked unbelievable. He looked like he belonged with the team against Orlando City. He had a really strong preseason. And Bradley Carnell, just throughout the preseason, was just raving about this kid. And he is given so much back to Bradley Carnell and this team. And it really helps this team where we'll probably get into it, where this summer transfer window, they probably needed to bring in a center back, and some moves just didn't finalize and weren't able to get it over the line and everything. And because we saw this last year with Nathan Harriel playing as a center back, the third choice center
mhm,
back, I'm sure that played a part in Bradley Cornell saying, okay, look, we're comfortable with Nathan Harriel playing as a center back if we need it. Fingers crossed that Jacob Glesnes and Makanya don't get any injuries. I remember back in 2023, it was against you guys in the playoffs. We didn't have Jacob Glesnes because he had a what was it, a groin or hernia injury, and he was just playing so many consecutive games and
mhm,
everything. Yeah, he just tore his hernia and everything, and wasn't up to par last season, had a really bad year for the Union. And then this year, finally gets healthy and gets included back into the MLS All-Star team for a
mhm.
third time in his career, I believe it was. And so, yeah, fingers crossed that none of the center backs get injured. But because of the emergence of Frankie Westfield, I do believe that allowed Bradley Cornell to be comfortable playing Nathan Harriel as a center back every now and then. And yes, the injury to Jan Glavinovic was devastating to his meniscus against St. Louis City. It feels like forever ago. And the Union recently announced that he wound up going on the season-ending injury list. And I think that did raise a lot of eyebrows in the fan base because, as Cincinnati fans probably know, if not, when you put a player on the injury list, it opens up an international roster slot if they're taking one, and then it
Mhm.
also allows salary relief to the club. And so Jan was taking a international roster slot. The Union currently didn't have any, and so people were thinking, "Oh, this means that they're going to make a move. This means that they're going to make a move." and they wind up not making a move. Some things just didn't
Mhm.
materialize, but it's better to get yourself occupied and situated. And then now you're going out there and trading for an international roster slot, which I feel like the price is varied. It feels like people give them away for free to Inter Miami, and then you see teams like New England paying just such a high price for them. So I don't know what the league's doing, just giving freebies out to Inter Miami, where it feels like they have more international players than they do American players at the roster now.
Yeah, that's I think a story for another time, another effort. I wish that there was a way that we could sort of figure out the standard, the gold standard for what an international roster spot was worth in terms of GAM. I think for many teams, it's whatever your going price is. For other teams, it's an automatic 200K.
Yeah.
I think I recall that we gave one we traded one away for GAM, then we got it back for less GAM, or I can't remember who gave less GAM over the other, but we're in the same boat with you. I mean, we were starting up with a lot of injuries coming in. I mean, Miazga was not 100%; he was not ready. Luca Urshano was not ready. Dado Valenzuela was not ready. Hagelin wasn't ready. There were a lot of missing pieces on our end. Hopefully, we've got some pieces in place now that we've got an entire half season under our belt. We've got a lot of talent ready to jump in and help out. And I think that's what one of the exciting things about this game coming up is going to be. But I also wanted to ask a little bit more about Bradley Carnell in general. The biggest question going in was, does he have this ability as head coach? He did well with St. Louis, but then you've seen what St. Louis has been like the past few years. And now we had news this week that their sporting director has gone out the door as well. I mean, looking at Carnell as a head coach, what aspect of his coaching style do you feel fits the best with Philadelphia?
Yeah, I would say where Ernst Henner and Jim Curtin probably didn't align is, and Ernst Henner spoke heavily about this after they fired Jim Curtin last season, November, I believe it was. And then once they introduced Bradley Cornell, just talking about getting back to the way that we play, high pressing, because towards the end of Jim Curtin's time in charge with the Union, a lot of injuries and everything. And so they're playing more of a possession style of soccer. Jack McGlynn, who was on the roster at the time before he got sold or traded to Houston Dynamo in January of this year, Jim Curtin was doing everything he can to get Jack McGlynn on the ball, to highlight his talents, because nobody's denying that Jack McGlynn's a talented player, but Jack McGlynn was never going to fit into a high press system. And so the Union started to get away from that. And Bradley Carnell, Ernst Henner said, we both come from the Red Bull style of play. You want to play high press? We'll play high press. But the thing that I think is interesting with the Union under Bradley Carnell, they just had a sequence against Chicago over the weekend where they put 21 passes together before they scored a goal. And under Jim Curtin, you would see route one soccer, one long ball over the top, and now you're in 3-4 passes, and now you're in with a chance. But under Bradley Carnell, they really do play exciting soccer. They're a team that Bradley Carnell says it. He's a coach that doesn't want to have possession of the ball, but this team has enough quality where they can hold on to the possession of the ball. And fans are like, and media too, are like, maybe Jack McGlynn could fit into the team. I don't think so, because of just how hard pressing the 210s are in the system. For fans that are unfamiliar, the Union play a 4-2-2-2 formation. So 210s, two number sixes. Under Jim Curtin, they were playing primarily a diamond formation, but then they would get away to that and switch it up a little bit to one at top during the game and everything. And Bradley Carnell makes those changes too, if necessary. But they do primarily play in that 4-2-2-2. And a big part of that is because of the pressing from the two number 10s, the pressing from the two number sixes. And I do feel bad for Bradley Carnell. I think Bradley Carnell is a really good coach. I would say you were talking about Lutz getting fired this past week from St. Louis, and
Mhm.
that's a roster, in my opinion, that I think when Bradley Carnell left was just so far behind to the roster that he inherited with the Philadelphia Union. And I don't know if you would ever admit that publicly, but just looking at the depth chart before they go out and get Alosky this summertime, I think on paper there was enough depth on that team where Bradley Cornell felt comfortable. Okay, look, he's a coach that's not afraid to rotate week in, week out. He doesn't seem to have a stuck starting 11. One week you might see a whole different pairing up top. The next week you might see another different pairing. The
Mhm.
only thing I would say that's really been consistent in Bradley Cornell's formations this year is Quinn Sullivan and Indiana Vassilev as the two number 10s, Kai Wagner as a left back, and then Jacob Glesnes and Makanya because of injuries. But everybody else in the lineup and goalkeeper, but Andre Blake's missed a lot of time too this season because of injuries. But everyone else, you get rotated weekly. And so I think that's been a big help for this team where Bradley Cornell comes in and is happy with the youth in the squad. I mentioned Frankie Westfield. That was a big surprise for many in Philadelphia. And we both know it, right? Going from MLS Next Pro to MLS, that's a big
Mhm.
jump. And
Huge, yeah.
I'm not huge on MLS Next Pro. I don't know how you are. I think that there's a lot of players for the Union, and we started to see it this summertime where CJ Olney leaves MLS Next Pro, goes to Lexington in the USL Championship. Davi Vasquez, he leaves the MLS Next Pro side and goes out to San Diego, getting consistent playing time there. Andrew Rick, who's going to be the starting goalkeeper this week for the Union against Cincinnati, I think that his development's done in MLS Next Pro, and so I didn't know what to expect from Frankie Westfield because he did so well with MLS Next Pro, but it's like, is he ready for the MLS net level? And he absolutely was. So Bradley Cornell inherited a squad that he felt comfortable with. And I would argue, like I said, that was a better team than it was in St. Louis.
Yeah,
And you
I
look
would
at what's happening in St. Louis this season, and the same problems under Bradley Cornell are still happening. And
yeah.
it starts with the sporting director, and finally, Lutz gets uh, fired. And I think maybe some St. Louis fans would say that it was a long time coming, and it finally happened. And what's interesting is both Bradley Cornell and Lutz have both been let go after a Vancouver game. So
Oh,
maybe it's
jeez.
maybe it all comes back around. So
Maybe you shouldn't play Vancouver twice a season. Come back into the the Eastern Conference, and enjoy us over here a little bit.
yes, yes.
Um, but you had mentioned Ernst Tanner, and uh, I mean, how would you grade him in terms of his performance as a sporting director?
Yeah, there is a moment there. I think it was the 2023 or 2024 window. I mean, the years fall together just so quickly. Where the Union went out and traded for Damian Lowe from Inter Miami. They trade for Andres Pereira from Orlando City, and they go out and acquire Joaquin Torres from Montreal. And so, on paper, these aren't exciting moves, but a lot of people in the fan base were wanting Ernst Tanner to go out and get more MLS players, players that have MLS experience. And the only one I would say that it worked out for was Damian Lowe, where he was at certified number 3 center back. He had been with Reading United. He used to be an affiliate of the Union back in the day. So he was familiar with Jim Curtin. He was familiar with the Union organization. I think that was a good hire. But I look at a player like Richard Odada, never panned out, never played for the first team. I look at a player like Ty Baribo, who wasn't playing a lot. Makanya wasn't playing a lot. Like, he's been with the team since 2023 in the summertime, and he finally got a chance under Bradley Cornell in the starting 11. And he looks like he's been in the starting 11 for the last few years, and he's been so vital for this team's success. And so, under Jim Curtin, we didn't see Baribo get a chance. We didn't see Makanya get a chance. And I think maybe that annoyed Ernst Tanner a little bit, where it's like, I go out and I get you pieces and you're not playing them. And yes, I know Baribo finally got a chance after Julian Kranzler was sold to Feyenoord last year. And we all remember what Baribo did against Cincinnati in
Mhm.
the league, scores a hat trick, and scores 2 goals and scored a hat trick this game at Subaru Park.
Mhm.
But Baribo finishes the League's Cup as a Golden Boot winner. And so people are like, maybe it wasn't Ernst Tanner that was the issue. Maybe it was Jim Curtin not giving these guys a chance, not getting the most out of these players. And so, yes, there has been misses under Ernst Tanner, but this fan base would tell you, people in the media would tell you there's more hits than there's not. I look at a player, Jovan Lukic, stud, one of the best number 6s in MLS. Danley John Jock, who they acquired from FC Metz during the summertime last year, has been a stud. I look at a player like Bruno Damiani, who has 4 goals on the season, I believe it is. They paid $3.8 million, which is a club record, which is shocking, I'm sure, for the
Mhm.
Cincinnati fan base. 3.8 million, like what?
That
That's your
that's
highest.
chicken
Yes,
feed. Yeah.
for a team like Philadelphia, they don't spend high, and they go out and splash the cash on Bruno Damiani. And to some of this fan base, yeah, they're pretty upset that the return hasn't been there from
Mm.
Damiani. But I would say, and I think maybe you guys would agree with this too. Like we see it all the time where when players come to MLS in their first season, they don't always hit the ground running. It takes them usually a year to catch up, and that's not the case with every player, but most players, it seems to be the case. Where Bruno Damiani is leaving Uruguay, sorry, for the first time, and he's coming to a whole new continent. He's coming to a new country, a new league, new team, and everything. And so it takes time to get adjustment. But if you look at the numbers for Bruno Damiani, his hold up play has been excellent. He's such a strong defender. He'll win those 50-50 battles in the air for you. And so, yes, he's not scoring the goals, but he's doing all the little things right that Bradley Carnell wants in his strikers. And so, going back to your question, yeah, Ernst Tanner's done a fantastic job with the limited amount of money that the Union typically spend. And there was moments there where this fan base and some of the media were questioning, oh, has Ernst Tanner lost it? Has his magic run out? And then he comes out and has another strong window in the wintertime and goes out and gets Alaski after his loan with San Diego gets canceled. And Alaski's played 3 or 4 games, I believe, now with Union, and scores his first goal and first assist in MLS with Union this past weekend against Chicago. And he looks like a player that should be starting in week in, week out, but he's been filling in for Indiana Vassilev, who's out with a concussion. But yeah, it's been great move after great move. It feels like these last couple windows under Ernst Tanner.
I mean, you brought up Iloski, who was just burning it up as a substitute in San Diego. When San Diego let him go, I'm like, there's going to be an MLS team that's going to snatch him up right away, because you don't let talent like that go back to his team. You get him onto your side. I think we saw it, for example, when Kevin Kelsey joined us last season. He might not have been the most glamorous name or the most glorious goal scorer, but he came back, picked up, because that asset was there for the taking. It sounds to me like that was really the only asset that Philadelphia needed going into this transfer portal. Do you feel that there are any holes that are still left?
Yeah, I had mentioned it. Center back. Yeah, Nathan Harriel is going to play as a third string center back. We've seen him play it this season, but yeah, I can't imagine what this team looks like if you get an injury to Makanya or Jacob Glesnes, because now you're starting Nathan Harriel week in, week out. And Neil Pierre, who I thought would get more chances with the first team this year, had a fantastic season with Union 2 last year, a highly thought of prospect coming out of the Union's academy. And there was questions he might not even sign a homegrown deal with Union just because he's sought after so much in Europe. There was reports that he might wind up going to Borussia Mönchengladbach, and he winds up signing a homegrown contract here in Philadelphia. And I thought he would have got more chances this year. Hasn't featured yet for the first team yet, and so now, if you suffer an injury to a Jacob Glesnes or Makanya, now Neil Pierre becomes your third string center back, and you're probably starting Nathan Harriel, like I said. And does Bradley Carnell trust Neil Pierre yet? I would say no, because we haven't seen him feature yet. If you were going to feature him, you would have played him during one of the U.S. Open Cup games. That hasn't happened, and now that the Union are on to the semifinals, there's no way that the Union play him against Nashville in a couple of weeks. And so, yeah, I do wonder what's going on in Neil Pierre's mind, where he looks at a player like Frankie Westfield makes his debut this year. Saul Levis, Eddie Davis, Q Forts make their debuts this year. David Vasquez makes his debut this year. All these players coming through from Union 2 make their debuts with the first team. And I would argue that Neil Pierre's a better prospect, was a better player last year under Union 2 than an Eddie Davis and Saul Levis. Frankie Westfield and CJ Only both made it into MLS Next Pro's best 11 last year. So there's an argument to be had there. Is Neil as high as those guys? But yeah, I do wonder what's going in his mind, seeing all of his teammates in Union 2 making their debuts. Frankie Westfield's been the most consistent with playing time this year out of that young core group of players. But yeah, center back's one that I would say is a big question mark. And when you can bring in a player like Alaski, who can play as a striker, played this past weekend as a number 10, that versatility is what makes this team so special. And that's what we've seen the MO be under Ernst Tanner. It feels like ever since he's got here, bringing in players that, number one, they fit the team culture, that they're going to buy into what the locker room's already established. But number two, can you play in multiple different positions? And the question with Alaski is yes. Now the argument is he a better number 9 or is he a better number 10 in this Union system? And what we saw this past weekend against Chicago, I would say he's probably a better number 10. But the issue is, I mentioned it, is he's filling in for Indiana Vassilev. Indiana Vassilev came over from St. Louis City, was one of Bradley Cornell's favorite players in St. Louis when they were there together. Does Olaski take Indy's spot once he's healthy, once he's back from that concussion? To be determined. I would say just because of how much Bradley Carnell loves Indy, probably not. But maybe. I mean, after you have a performance like Olaski had, a goal and an assist, had 6 dribbles completed, the most in the match, and now you have a player opposite of Quinn Sullivan that's not afraid to take players on 1v1. You have another player that's creating chances where it's not all on Kai Wagner or Quinn Sullivan. How do you take him out of the starting lineup? And we'll see what Bradley Cornell does once Indy Vasiliev becomes healthy.
I mean, I really think that Olaski is sort of that super sub, like you had mentioned. Maybe to draw a parallel, a little bit like a Yuya Kubo here, where he's able to come off the bench and give you whatever position you're really looking for on offense. But you bring in also up the center back situation. That makes me wonder how Pat Noonan's going to attack the defense this time around. I mean, you've got Kevin Denke, who admittedly is coming back from an injury. Still might not be 100%, but even a 75% Denke is still very good. But you're also bringing in, and now Brenner, who's making his big time re-debut for the team, hopefully this weekend. If he can come in and give you 30 minutes off the bench or even 60 to start, this is, I think, an offense that can exploit the flux in the center back position. If Glesnes or Macania are not anywhere near ship shape, maybe that's where your attack comes through. But I also look at Philadelphia's. You mentioned the double six, Lukic and Jean-Jacques. I think that the two of them are doing an incredible job in the middle there. Something that it used to be just Jose Martinez would be the only person who would do that. Now you've got two really subtle but defensive forces in the middle that can, I think, reinforce that center back position. We'll see what happens when you've got Evander patrolling around the middle a little bit with Pavel Buka, hopefully giving a little bit more of an offensive threat than he did last weekend. This game really interests me. Whoever wins this, if there is a winner, is going to have hopefully control of this conference. I don't want to see Miami sneak up on us again like they did last year. So let's look at how this game is going to go down. Who do you feel is the X factor for Philadelphia in this game?
That's a good question. So I knew you mentioned the center backs, and neither one, Macani or Glesnes, has been a weakness this year for the team. I mean, the Union lead MLS in the fewest amount of goals given up in 26, and it's really been an impressive performance watching what the Union do defensively. I believe now they're lower than 1 goal a game given up, which is the fewest in MLS. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Somebody can fact check me on it, but the Union were hovering right around 1, and I believe because they had a shutout this weekend against Chicago, it finally went down under a goal a game given up. And so, yeah, the Union have been really, really strong defensively, but an X factor coming into this game. I mean, it's such a good question, Jeff, because I think when Union fans are going to look at that game back on March 1st against Cincinnati at Subaru Park, it ends up being 4-1 Philadelphia. One thing that I tell Union fans all the time is Cincinnati had a Champions Cup game to prepare for. And so, yes, I know that they started a Denke in that game. They started Evander in the game. They started Yedlin, who I know is not at the club anymore, Miles Robinson. But I would argue that Cincinnati was more focused on that Champions Cup game than they were the game back in Subaru Park. And we had mentioned it had been a long time since the Union had beat Cincinnati. The last one coming, I believe it was on in MLS play. That is the last time that the Union won. That wasn't this past season. I believe it came all the way back in 2022, maybe 2022. I want to say back at Subaru Park when the Union won 1-0 against Cincinnati. Yeah, I know that the Union did also beat Cincinnati in a conference, or not the conference. They beat them at one point in the playoffs too, if I'm not mistaken. Liam Flock scored the goal. I can't remember when that was. Maybe back in the same season, 2022. But yeah, I mean, it had been a long time for the Union to get a win. And you talked about it was always the teacher versus the apprentice with Jim Curtin and Pat Noonan. And it seemed like Pat Noonan had Jim Curtin's number. And no matter what Jim could do, it just seemed like Pat Noonan in Cincinnati just always found a way to, squeak one back. I can remember Brandon Vasquez scoring a couple goals to draw level against Philadelphia. And it's like, there was a game last year. It was 2-0. I think the Union were winning, and it wound up being 2-2 draw. And remember listening in to the Sons of Ben chanting, "Go back to Cincinnati, go back to Cincinnati." I'm like, "What are you guys doing? You're up 2-0, 58 minutes into the game. Like, don't say that to these guys." And they wind up scoring 2 goals and drawing. And it's like, Cincinnati's a good team. Like, I don't know why you guys are getting so high, like, on this team right now. It's like you guys brought it on yourself. And it's always a good matchup between these two teams. And so I know you asked me the X factor, and I've tried to find a way to dodge around that question. But man, if I had to say a specific player,
I mean, is there someone that
I'd
you feel
say,
needs to shine to prove himself going into the
I don't
postseason?
know if there's anybody that needs to prove themselves into this starting lineup. Maybe some people in the fan base would say it's Bruno Damiani because he hasn't scored a goal in a hot minute. But again, he does such of the little things so well that Bradley Carnell doesn't seem that as an issue. And you have 18 different goal scorers for the Union this year, which leads MLS, all teams in MLS, for that many different goal scorers. And so when Barriba is not scoring, it seems like other players step up and find a way to find the back of the net. Uh, whew. I'm going to say Jovan Lukic. I mean, he's been phenomenal this season, but it's going to be important because him and Danley John Jock, you mentioned the 2 double sixes. Both of those guys love to push up into the attack when they have the opportunity, but they've really got to be dialed in where, hey, look, if it's Lukic going up, Danley, you got to stay back. If it's Danley going up, which it seems to be more of, Jovan's got to sit back because there's enough quality in this Cincinnati team where they're going to want to hit you on the counterattack. They have enough speed. They have enough pace. They have good quality in the midfield. And so I think the key is going to be that double six, that they need to be locked in defensively. They need to just constantly be communicating. But if I had to say a player, it's got to be Jovan Lukic, because we've seen throughout the season too where the Union aren't afraid to get him on the ball and play that playmaking role. And he does have good vision on him. He can break teams down that play a low block. He can beat teams with 3 balls and everything. So I would look for Jovan Lukic to have a good game, but for the Union to have success, I think it all starts with that number 6 tandem of Jovan Lukic and Danley John Jock.
I'm going to give a name that probably just because he's a name that we haven't seen, and also because it's a name that we've exploited in the past. It's usually been Andre Blake and between the pipes, and he's done very well, no doubt about it. The last time I can remember the offense figuring out the goalkeeper, it was Oliver Semmel. So Andrew Rick, I want to see really if last week really was him coming out and being this backup goalkeeper that he can really prove himself when Blake is down. If he can be that strong goalkeeper, that strong presence between the pipes, and not be what Semmel was, giving up that long goal to Orishana last time. If he can prove himself to be sort of strong, sort of like what a Patrick Schulte was able to turn around and become for the Crew, that interests me as an X factor in this game. From our perspective, as much as I want to say the X factors are going to be, Brenner coming back for his big re-debut, I want to see what the right wing back position looks like. I think was it Dominic Markzuk, who they picked up after they had dealt DeAndre Yedlin, with the hope that he would fill in that wingback spot. That was exploited in the game against New York City FC last week with Alvis Powell, former Union guy, trying to play a full game there, and unfortunately, he just didn't have it. That's my X factor here. I want to see if he can sort of plug in there and be sort of a stopgap while we try to figure out how our back line is going to look on this, especially on the sides.
Yeah, it's fair. To your point about Andrew Rick, this was last season. You mentioned Oliver Zemla. Andre Blake obviously had a lot of injuries last year, and so they kept going back and forth between Rick and Zemla, and it was pretty evident after Zemla gets chipped by Orishano from, it seems like, past the halfway line, wasn't it? It was like over 60 yards or something. It was,
at that point, it was the longest goal he'd ever scored, and then he scored a longer one against Montreal. But I
Unbelievable.
mean, that was also, it was during play. It was, it wasn't a set piece situation, which made it even more fantastic from our perspective. Uh, I don't see Rick doing that mistake, but I can see exploitation down there.
Yeah, I agree with you, and like even if you look at the numbers, I mean Blake's played 17 games this season. Rick's played 12 games this year for the Union, and both goalkeepers have 5 clean sheets each. The one big key difference is Andre Blake 75% save percentage, where Andrew Rick's at 61.5, and so Andrew Rick, I would say, is not as good of a shot stopper as Andre Blake is, but where Andrew Rick does measure out so much better than Andre Blake is his distribution out of the back line with his passing. That's been key for the Union when he's been playing. He had an assist to Quinn Sullivan, who was the team. I forget where Quinn scored. Andrew plays a free kick all the way to Quinn Sullivan, and he scores off of that free kick. And yet the Union do try to get Andrew Rick on the ball to try to break teams down because of how good his vision is. Not many people know this, but he came up as a defensive midfielder, and so that's why his passing so good. It is because he started out as an outfield player and then eventually transitioned into a goalkeeper. And so Andrew Rick, he's made a lot of strides from last season to this year. Where Union fans, yes, they don't want to see Andre Blake hurt, but unfortunately, you've come to expect it the last 2 years. I mean, so many different injuries to Andre Blake, mostly to his groin area, his hamstring,
Hmm.
had a concussion too last year, I believe it was. And yeah, last year was not good in the goalkeeping department. And I do know that the Union made such a strong push last year before they brought in Zemla to try to get John McCarthy in here, but he winds up going to LA Galaxy. And I was left scratching my head. I don't know if you saw this, but he winds up going McCarthy from LA Galaxy to New York Red Bulls for a third round pick in the MLS Super Draft. And the Union don't have any draft picks. They traded them all the way to Colorado Rapids this past offseason. But it's like you couldn't have gave like 50K in GAM, 75 in GAM to get John McCarthy in. Like I think John McCarthy would be perfect for the Union. And the Union had to go out and get another new goalkeeper because Andre Blake's out. You loan Oliver Zemla to North Carolina and USL. And now that left you with Andrew Rick. You had to give a short-term call-up to Pierce Holbrook, who was the Union 2 goalkeeper. But in warm-ups, the team hasn't officially came out and said what the injury is. He injured his knee. Did not look good whatsoever. Union have to go out and get now another goalkeeper. And so, yeah, I mean, God forbid anything happens to Andrew Rick. And
Mm.
goalkeeper could be an issue for the Union for sure, just because Andrew Rick is young. He is no Andre Blake. And you're right. You've seen over the years success from Cincinnati against Andre Blake, and you saw success against Oliver Zemla last year. What can Andrew Rick do where he wasn't really tested that much last weekend against Chicago, against a much more prominent attack? And yes, I do realize that Chicago has Jonathan Bamba, who's been good for them. Zenko Knuckles been excellent for them. Hugo Kuipers has been good this season for Chicago. But I would say Evander, in my opinion, MVP candidate, should win MVP this year. I know you're always going to have people say Messi, 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 but what Evander's done this season for Cincinnati has been unbelievable. We knew he was good in Portland, but did we know that he would potentially be better than Lucho Acosta? I think there could be an argument to be made that Evander is a better player. I think he fits in this team a lot better. He is younger, obviously, but in my opinion, I know Lucho brought a lot of flair to this Cincinnati team, but it just seems like it's something a little bit different about Evander and the way that he just combines with his teammates and the way that he really controls the midfield. We saw it under his time in Portland, where he could change a game on his own. He can certainly do it for Cincinnati, and so that's why I mentioned the two number sixes, because I think that he has the ability to have a very, very big game against the Union this weekend.
We'll see. We'll see. I think there are a lot of people who also feel that while Evander's got a heck of a lot of talent, sometimes those goals, those shots on goal come a little too far out. So we'll see if they can figure out ways of penetrating more into the box. Maybe is having a stronger striker across from Denke gives you that opportunity. The Jersey Swap podcast is also sponsored by Beyond Exercise. Beyond Exercise is a local physical therapy and fitness business that helps people stay active and injury-free. In fact, they help some of our local MLS, MLS Next Pro, and FCC Academy players with their health and performance needs. Check out their suite of services at gobeyondexercise.com. So let's give you an opportunity. What's your prediction for this game?
Oh man, putting me on the spot.
Laying it out there.
Prediction for this game. I said it on my show last episode. I said the Union have to get a minimum point in TKL Stadium this weekend. I don't buy into what the Union did back in March, where they beat Cincinnati. The goalkeeping situation does scare me a little bit. For the Union, there are moments where they do look inconsistent in creating chances. How strong will Cincinnati be defensively this week? I mean, it's a good question. I've been a little bit shocked that Cincinnati hasn't seemed as strong this season at TQL Stadium as they have in years past, obviously coming off that 1-0 loss to New York City.
I mean, you can point out, and this isn't Noonan, but you can point out the first year they were in TQL, they didn't win a game at TQL until September.
That's
so
true.
While we say it's a fortress, I think it was that one year that they won the Supporter Shield that it was a fortress. Last year down the stretch, they really did not look good at home. I want to say they didn't look good at home this time around just because New York City has their number defense-wise. If they can pull together a defense like that against our attack, then I think any team can beat us in our home. I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to say 2-2. I still think high scoring this one. It's not going to help either of our cases, which is going to really, I think, put a damper on people's parades this weekend.
Yeah, 2-2 sounds right for me too. But again, I mean, you look at the last 4 games played at TQL between these two teams. The Union haven't had a win, and so that does scare me. Does it change under Bradley Carnell? Yeah, sure, that's possible, but I do think it's going to be high scoring. I mean, there's just too much attacking talent in this team, and I mentioned that New York Red Bulls is a example. They don't create any chances. Only one shot on target at Red Bull Stadium. It was a penalty kick that was saved by Carlos Cornell, and then they come out and have 23 shots, create a whole bunch of chances. Could have had more goals against Chicago. So what Philadelphia Union side are you going to get this weekend against Cincinnati? I don't know. If you start Alosky, I definitely see the Union scoring goals. But again, yeah, I'll stick with 2-2 as well. Like you said, it doesn't help either team, but I think 2-2 is probably fair.
If you see a win this weekend, that's going to help the overall, I think, positioning within the East, because that keeps a team like a Nashville, a Miami, in to some extent, a Charlotte, who is red hot as well. It keeps them looking up towards someone. If we devour each other's lunch and there's nothing to present but a draw between the two of us, that's going to open up so many doors, especially on the Western side too. You're going to have San Diego and Minnesota and Vancouver all going to see their doors of opportunity open up for hosting an MLS Cup in the future. Yep, we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be a tough game, and I'm glad that we brought somebody in who could definitely show us how tough an opponent Philadelphia is going to be this year. I want to thank you for your time with us, Todd. Where can we find you guys, your podcast, and anywhere else on the open market that we call the World Wide Web?
Yeah. I first want to say thank you, Jeff, for having me on. Thank you, Justin Blair, for all that you do for Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Cincinnati fans are definitely blessed to have you guys. You guys just crush the content every single week. And I started off the show saying it really takes an army to pull off what Jeff and Justin and the guys are doing over there at Cincinnati Soccer Talk. So you guys are very fortunate to have them in Cincinnati. But yeah, you guys can follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Free Kick Pod. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can check out The Free Kick. youtube.com/Free Kick Pod, where I'm live every single episode, usually the day after the game, talking about the match. Usually it's myself. Sometimes I get Jose Nunez, who's a writer for MLS. He also appears on AAT Sports Across the Pitch. And so whenever Jose is free, he'll hop over to the podcast and join me. And I also do goals breakdown videos, which every time I appear on fans' podcasts and everything, I always get so many opposing fans just giving a lot of praise for that. So yeah, I don't just break down the goals that the Union score. If the Union concede goals, I break that down too. And so I have a blast breaking down game film, chances created, goals conceded, all that fun stuff. And so, yeah, youtube.com/freekickpod to watch the podcast live or check out the goals breakdown video. Or if you want to check out my writing, the podcast, or the goals breakdown video all in one place, thefreekick.substack.com.
Hopefully you're breaking down a lot of goals that we've scored against you this weekend. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. And so if you guys want to follow us, I mean, we have our live show every Monday night. We have the Jersey Swap usually in your boxes on Thursdays or Fridays. You can find us at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com, Cincy Soccer Talk on all of your favorite social media sites. And go to your podcast platforms and listen to us. When we record, we put it on audio only. We're also on YouTube. We put our own shows there as well. Hopefully next week we have something special in the box. Yeah, I mean, it's an off week, international break, so crossing our fingers that we can get the guests in place. But on behalf of myself, on behalf of Todd, for joining me this week, keep your kit clean, folks. Let's keep it a nice, clean 90 minutes. Thank you very much, Todd.
Thank you.